At Mom's birthday party, I knew my sister was waiting for the right moment to humiliate me publicly. My name is Jocelyn. I am 34 years old, and I had spent most of that evening ignoring the comments she kept making about my work. Every time someone asked what I did, she answered before I could speak, making it sound as if I was still trying to figure out my life. I let it go because the party was for Mom, not for us. Then my sister decided private insults were no longer enough. She looked around at our family and the guests who had gathered nearby, then turned back to me with a smile. "You'll always be the biggest failure in this family." Several people went quiet while others looked away, as if pretending they had not heard her. I did not argue or explain myself because I already knew something she did not. Something connected to a decision that would be made the following morning. I looked directly into her eyes. "Are you sure you want to say that in front of everyone?" She could have stopped there, but instead she scoffed and made it clear she meant every word. I smiled because she still had no idea what was happening behind the scenes, or why her husband had suddenly stopped laughing. By the next morning, the person everyone called a failure would no longer be the one facing uncomfortable questions. Before I tell you how that birthday party changed everything, subscribe and tell me where you are watching from. Have you ever had someone in your own family decide who you were without ever taking the time to know the truth? 2 hours earlier, I had arrived at the conservatory alone, just as most guests were finding their seats. Mom had chosen the place for her 60th birthday because it was large enough for relatives, old friends, plus people from Dad's business circle. I checked in at the entrance, left my coat with the attendant, then walked toward the main room. I was there for Mom, which was the only reason I had agreed to spend another evening around people who treated my work like a temporary phase. My older sister Chelsea noticed me first. She was standing beside Mom while Chelsea's husband Bradley spoke with two guests near the bar. My younger brother Connor sat with Dad at a nearby table, laughing about something on his phone. I had barely reached them when Mom pulled me into a quick hug. "Jocelyn, you made it." I was starting to think work had kept you again. The way she said work made one of the women beside her smile. I ignored it, wished Mom a happy birthday, then handed her the gift I had brought. Before I could say anything else, Mom introduced me to the couple standing beside her. "This is Jocelyn. She does some property work from home." I could have corrected her, but Chelsea stepped into the conversation before I had the chance. She explained that her company had been growing, mentioned her new responsibilities, then laughed as if the difference between us was obvious. Nobody had asked for a comparison, yet she created one within a minute of my arrival. A man I had met once at one of Dad's holiday dinners asked what kind of property work I handled. I started to answer, but Chelsea spoke first. "Mostly small projects. She likes the flexibility." I looked at her. "I can answer for myself." Chelsea gave me the same patient smile she used whenever she wanted other people to think I was being difficult. She said she was only helping because I never explained my work clearly, then asked whether I had considered finding something more stable. "Send me your resume. I might be able to find an administrative position with benefits." Several people heard her, including Mom, who said it was a thoughtful idea. Dad nodded without asking whether I wanted help. Connor looked down at his drink, clearly trying not to get involved. I told Chelsea I was fine with my current work, then turned back to Mom because I refused to make her birthday about another argument. That should have ended the subject, but Chelsea kept returning to it whenever someone new joined the group. Each version became simpler than the last. I worked from home. I took small projects. I had never found the right career. By the time dinner was close, people who had known me for less than 20 minutes were giving me advice I had never requested. My phone vibrated with a message that needed a reply, so I stepped away for several minutes. When I returned, Chelsea was telling 3 guests about a renovation project I had left years earlier. She described it as a business failure, leaving out the fact that I had walked away before the owner lost financing. That was when we all realized business probably wasn't Jocelyn's thing, she said. The guests laughed politely, though one woman looked uncomfortable. Chelsea saw me standing there but did not stop. I felt the old pressure to correct every detail, yet I knew the real problem was larger than one false story. My family had spent years letting Chelsea explain me to other people while I kept quiet, because challenging her always became another argument about my attitude. This time, I stayed beside the group long enough to hear exactly how far she was willing to take it. By the time dinner began, everyone had settled into the roles my family knew best. I sat between Connor and one of Mom's longtime friends while Chelsea took the seat closest to Mom. The conversation quickly followed the same pattern as before. People asked Chelsea about work because she spoke about it often, while questions directed at me usually turned into advice. Dad waited until the first course had been served before bringing up my job again. He asked whether I had ever considered joining a larger company, explaining that a regular salary and health insurance would make life easier. "When are you going to find something with a steady paycheck and benefits?" Dad asked. I told him my current work already covered what I needed. He frowned as if I had avoided the question, but I did not explain further. They understood job titles, salaries, promotions, plus companies they could mention to other people. My work did not fit the version they had accepted years ago. Chelsea soon redirected the conversation toward herself. She said Crestwell Commercial Group was preparing a major deal that could give the company room to expand. Mom immediately asked whether that meant another promotion. Chelsea smiled, saying nothing had been announced, though her tone suggested she expected everyone to assume good news was coming. "Crestwell is about to close a deal that could change everything for us," Chelsea said. Bradley did not share her confidence. He kept his attention on his plate until Dad asked what the deal involved. Chelsea explained that an investment group was reviewing several Crestwell properties. If the review went well, Crestwell would gain the financial support it needed for its next stage. That explanation caught my attention because I had spent part of the previous week reading a file with the same company name. Chelsea kept talking about the work her department had done to prepare the proposal. Bradley finally looked at her, then corrected one detail she had presented as certain. "Mercer Renewal Partners hasn't approved anything yet," Bradley said. Chelsea dismissed his concern and told the table that every large deal involved questions before approval. She seemed more interested in impressing Dad than discussing the actual risks, but Bradley clearly saw more risk than she did. I said nothing for several moments while I worked through what I knew. Mercer Renewal Partners was my company, though my family had never cared enough about my work to remember its name. Crestwell was one of several businesses under review, which was why the file had not seemed personally important when I first saw it. I had only recently learned that Chelsea worked for the same company, after her name appeared among the executives connected to the proposal. The timing created a problem I could not ignore. My position required me to avoid any decision involving a close family member. I had already informed my team that I would not take part in the final review, which meant the decision would continue without my vote. Across the table, Chelsea began describing the client projections her department had helped prepare. She said the numbers showed strong retention for the coming year, which made Crestwell a safer investment than some people believed. Mom looked impressed while Dad asked whether Chelsea had presented the figures herself. I remembered the questions our review team had raised about those projections. Several clients listed as likely to stay had not provided written commitments, leaving a gap between the confidence in the proposal and the evidence supporting it. Chelsea believed she was describing the work that would secure her future. I understood that the same work was already receiving more scrutiny than she knew. An hour later, the birthday speeches began. Dad spoke first, followed by Connor and two of Mom's friends. Most of them kept their remarks focused on her, which was how the evening should have stayed. Then Chelsea took the microphone. She started by thanking everyone for coming and talked about how much Mom had done for the family. Then she mentioned how proud Mom must be to see her children building their lives, and I knew the direction was changing. Chelsea talked about her work at Crestwell, the responsibilities she had taken on, plus the pressure of being the person everyone could depend on. She made one joke about Connor still asking Dad for tax advice, which got a few laughs. Then she looked at me. She said every family had one person who took longer to find a clear path. I kept my expression neutral because I did not want to reward her with the reaction she wanted. A woman near the front asked what kind of property work I did. I started to answer, but Chelsea lifted the microphone again and told everyone I preferred keeping things small because it meant less pressure. The room became quieter. I told Chelsea that I could speak for myself, but she claimed she was only saving me from another long explanation that nobody understood. A few people laughed because they thought she was joking. I did not find it funny, though I refused to give her the public argument she wanted. Chelsea continued, saying Mom had spent years worrying about whether I would ever settle into a real career. She presented every choice I had made as evidence that I lacked direction, while ignoring every time she had refused to hear the full story. The speech was no longer about Mom. It had become a public version of the same argument my family had repeated for years. I asked Chelsea to stop and reminded her that this was Mom's birthday, not a chance to explain my life to everyone. For a moment, she lowered the microphone. I thought she might finally understand how far she had gone, but embarrassment crossed her face when she noticed people watching us. Instead of backing away, she smiled as though I had proved her point. "You'll always be the biggest failure in this family." Nobody laughed this time. Mom looked down at the table while Dad shifted in his chair without saying anything. Connor stared at Chelsea, clearly waiting for her to take it back. Bradley looked toward me, then toward his wife. I stood without raising my voice. "Are you sure you want to say that in front of everyone?" Chelsea could have ended it there. She could have blamed the microphone, the drinks, or a joke that had gone too far. Instead, she scoffed and told me I was being dramatic. I said what everyone here already knows. I smiled because there was nothing left to explain. Chelsea had made her choice in front of the same people she wanted to impress, and I was not going to fight for approval from a room that had just watched her show exactly who she was. Before anyone could restart the speeches, a woman entering from the adjoining event space stopped when she saw me. I recognized her immediately, though I had not expected her to be at the conservatory that night. My company's chief operating officer, Dana Whitmore, had been attending a business reception in the next hall. She came over to ask whether I had seen the updated schedule for the following morning. During that brief exchange, Dana mentioned Crestwell by name. Bradley's expression changed first. Chelsea still looked annoyed, but her husband was no longer paying attention to our argument. He was looking at Dana, then at me, as if he had finally connected two pieces of information that had been sitting in front of him all evening. A few seconds later, Bradley was the first person to understand what Dana's presence meant. He asked whether she had said Crestwell, then looked at me before she could answer. The change in his voice was enough to pull Chelsea's attention away from our argument. Dana confirmed that the company was on the schedule for the next morning, though she did not discuss the review itself with guests standing nearby. Chelsea studied me with a confused expression. Until that moment, she had treated Dana as someone I happened to know through work. Now she wanted to understand why a senior executive from Mercer Renewal Partners had walked across the room to discuss a meeting with me. "You work for Mercer Renewal Partners?" Chelsea asked. Her question carried none of the confidence she had shown with the microphone. I told her that my work involved Mercer, which was true, but I did not explain further because Dana was still beside us. Chelsea immediately assumed I was a consultant or a junior employee on a property team. Dana looked at her, then back at me. She seemed to realize that my family had no idea what I actually did. "Jocelyn doesn't work for us. She founded the company," Dana said. Mom was the first to ask whether Dana meant the same company involved with Crestwell. Dad wanted to know how long I had been running it. Connor stared at me as if he were trying to remember past conversations he had ignored. I answered only what they asked. Mercer Renewal Partners bought and redeveloped commercial properties others had overlooked. I had started the company with one partner, then expanded it through projects that my family had always described as property work. I had mentioned the company before. They simply never asked enough questions to understand what I was telling them. Chelsea's confusion turned into anger faster than I expected. "You let us think you were struggling," Chelsea said. I reminded her that she had decided I was struggling. Mom had reduced my work to something I did from home, while Dad kept asking when I would find a real job. Chelsea had spent years answering questions for me, so she had never heard the answers herself. She accused me of hiding the truth because I wanted a moment like this. I told her I had not invited Dana over, arranged the business reception next door, or handed her the microphone. Nothing that happened that evening had been planned by me. Bradley asked the question Chelsea was avoiding. He wanted to know whether I was involved in the Crestwell review. I explained that I had seen the company file before learning Chelsea worked there. As soon as I confirmed the connection, I disclosed it internally and removed myself from the final decision. Dana gave a small nod, confirming that the process had already been reassigned. That answer did not calm Chelsea. She wanted to know who would make the decision whether I could speak to them, plus how much influence I still had. Her questions came so quickly that even Mom stopped trying to defend her. I told Chelsea the review would follow the same process it used for every company. I would not interfere for her benefit, just as I would not interfere against her. For the first time that evening, Chelsea was no longer trying to convince the room that I had failed. She was trying to calculate whether the person she had humiliated could affect something her company needed. I watched that realization settle over her, but I did not enjoy it the way she might have imagined. The painful part was seeing how quickly my value changed once my family understood my job. Chelsea moved closer to Bradley and asked him quietly whether the Crestwell deal could survive without Mercer. He did not answer immediately. His silence told her more than any explanation could have. The next morning, the Crestwell review continued without me. I arrived at the office before the meeting started, but I went directly to another project. My decision to step away had been recorded as soon as I confirmed Chelsea worked for Crestwell, so there was no reason for me to enter the review room or discuss the proposal with the committee. Dana stopped by my office before the meeting. She told me the independent team had received additional documents from Crestwell overnight, including material related to the client projections Chelsea had mentioned at dinner. I asked whether anything required my attention. Dana said no. My phone began vibrating shortly after 9. Chelsea called twice, then sent a message asking me to speak with her before the review ended. I did not respond because any conversation about Crestwell could create the appearance that I was influencing a process I had already left. Around noon, Bradley called instead. I answered because I expected him to ask about Chelsea. But his concern was more specific. Did you know they were questioning the client retention numbers? I told him I knew the review team had requested support for several projections, though I had not seen the new documents and would not be involved in judging them. Bradley went quiet before explaining that Chelsea's department had counted several clients as likely renewals, though no written commitments existed. His explanation confirmed why the numbers had raised questions. But I refused to discuss what the committee might decide. Then tell me one thing, Bradley said. Can Chelsea fix this before they make a decision? I told him that was not a question I could answer. Crestwell had to provide accurate records through the formal process while Chelsea needed to deal with her employer. I would not become a source of information simply because we were related. Later that afternoon, Dana returned with an update. The review had uncovered a larger gap than expected between Crestwell's projections and the documents supporting them. Some accounts had been presented as likely renewals after clients had raised concerns about continuing their contracts. The committee had asked Crestwell for explanations, which meant the company now had to account for how those figures entered the proposal. Chelsea called again after work. This time I answered because the review session had ended. You could have warned me last night, she said. I reminded her that I had not reviewed the supporting records and could not warn her about information I did not know. She insisted I must have heard something through Dana, then accused me of letting the process continue because I wanted her embarrassed. I felt anger rise, but the accusation also made something clear. Chelsea still believed every consequence had to be caused by someone else. The possibility that her department had submitted weak information seemed less believable to her than the idea that I had arranged a professional review to punish her. I told her my company would document every step of the process, including my withdrawal. If she believed I had interfered, she could raise that concern through Crestwell's legal team. I would not argue about it privately. After the call, I received a copy of the formal conflict disclosure for my records. It showed the date I had removed myself, the people assigned to replace me, plus the limits placed on my access to the final recommendation. The review had not become personal because Chelsea insulted me at a birthday party. It had remained professional because I made sure her behavior could not change the process. By the end of the day, Crestwell had been asked to provide more records while Chelsea had been called into a meeting with her leadership. What happened next would depend on the work her department had submitted, not on anything I said. 3 days later, Crestwell placed Chelsea on administrative leave while the company completed its internal review. I learned about it from Bradley, who called. He explained that Crestwell had compared the proposal with emails, client notes, plus earlier reports from Chelsea's department. The problem was no longer limited to optimistic estimates. Several concerns had been removed from the presentation, which made the retention numbers look stronger than the record supported. Chelsea says everyone adjusts projections before a major deal, Bradley said. I told him I could not judge what happened inside Crestwell. My company's review was separate while Crestwell had to decide whether its own policies had been followed. Bradley understood, though he admitted Chelsea still believed I could stop the situation. That afternoon, Mom called and quickly moved to Chelsea. Crestwell had suspended her access to company systems, which meant she could not contact clients or change files during the review. Mom wanted me to speak with someone at Mercer and explain that Chelsea had been under pressure. Please remember that she is your sister before this gets worse, Mom said. The request hurt more than I expected because Mom had watched Chelsea humiliate me in front of a room full of people without asking her to remember that I was her sister. Now that Chelsea faced consequences at work, family suddenly became the reason I was supposed to intervene. I told Mom that I had already removed myself from the business decision. Calling the review team would violate the boundary I had created, while contacting Crestwell about its employee would be even less appropriate. Mom said she was not asking me to break rules, but that was exactly what she wanted. 2 days later, Crestwell completed the first stage of its review. Chelsea had not created every questionable number herself, yet emails showed that she approved the final projections after members of her team warned that several client renewals were uncertain. She had also pushed to remove language that could make the proposal appear weaker. Crestwell terminated her employment for violating internal reporting standards and failing to address concerns raised by her staff. The company corrected its materials, then continued discussions with Mercer under increased review. The deal was not rejected because of Chelsea, but it became slower and harder for Crestwell to complete. Chelsea came to my office building the next afternoon without an appointment. Security called before allowing her upstairs, so I agreed to meet her in a conference room near reception. You could have made one phone call and stopped this, she said. I told her there had never been one phone call capable of erasing the records. Her company had reviewed emails created before the birthday party, while my withdrawal prevented me from deciding Crestwell's outcome. Chelsea accused me of enjoying what happened. I told her the truth was less satisfying. I had spent years being treated as the family problem, yet the moment she needed something from me, everyone expected me to use the career they had dismissed. She tried to shift the conversation back to the party, claiming she had only been joking because she had been drinking. I reminded her that the employment review was not about the party. It was about documents, decisions, plus warnings she had received from her team. Chelsea left after less than 20 minutes. I did not follow her or ask her to stay. Within the next month, Bradley moved into a smaller apartment after telling Chelsea he needed space. Connor sent me one message admitting he should have spoken up years earlier, but I did not answer immediately. Mom kept asking when the family could sit down together while Dad avoided the subject completely. For the first time, nobody could reduce the problem to a misunderstanding between sisters. The consequences came from records choices plus years of people assuming Chelsea would never be challenged. By the beginning of summer, enough time had passed for everyone to understand that nothing was returning to normal. Mom asked me to come to dinner because she wanted the family together again. I agreed once, not because I expected an apology, but because I wanted to hear what they had to say, without messages passing through other people. Chelsea was already there when I arrived. Losing her job had forced her to cut expenses while Bradley was still living separately. She had applied for several management positions, but explaining why Crestwell terminated her employment had made the search difficult. Mom asked whether I knew anyone who could help Chelsea find another job. Dad suggested that one introduction might give her a chance to rebuild her career. Neither of them asked whether Chelsea had taken responsibility for what happened. Chelsea finally said she would not have lost everything if I had warned her about the review. That answer settled the last question I had brought with me. I told her I would not use my contacts to speak to employers or repair damage caused by decisions she still refused to own. I also told Mom and Dad that I would no longer attend family gatherings where I was expected to accept disrespect simply to keep everyone comfortable. Chelsea called my decision cruel. I told her that ending contact was not revenge. I was choosing not to continue a relationship in which my value depended on whether I could solve someone else's problems. I left that dinner without promising another conversation. There was no reconciliation, no family photograph, plus no final apology that fixed everything. I ended contact with Chelsea completely and kept my distance from my parents because their attitude toward me had changed only after they learned what I had built. Looking back, I understood why Chelsea had treated me that way for so long. She did not simply want success for herself. She needed our family to believe she was always doing better than I was. Every time Mom or Dad accepted her version of my life, that position became easier to protect. When I stopped accepting it, Chelsea pushed harder because the role she had depended on was starting to disappear. The review did not uncover the truth because anyone wanted revenge. The numbers eventually had to be supported by evidence. Client records did not match the projections employees had raised concerns, plus emails showed which warnings had been ignored. Independent reviewers compared the claims with the documents while Crestwell examined its own records. That process worked because several people checked the same information instead of trusting one person's explanation. The birthday party did not destroy Chelsea's career or our family. Years of favoritism taught her that she would rarely be challenged, which fed her confidence at home and at work. She dismissed warnings, approved information she could not fully support, then blamed others when the consequences arrived. The party only exposed a pattern that had already been causing damage. If there is one lesson I would take from everything that happened, it is that humiliating someone else will never create real success. You should never provide business information you cannot support or try to interfere with a professional review for personal reasons. In the United States, misleading business records can lead to internal investigations, termination, civil consequences, or legal problems depending on the facts. No promotion or deal is worth putting your name behind information you know may be false. When a conflict of interest exists, disclose it and step away from the decision. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. I truly appreciate the time you spent listening. Do you think Chelsea lost everything because of my decision, or did her own choices finally catch up with her? If you were in my place, would you have walked away for good? Share your thoughts in the comments because I would like to hear your perspective. Before we end today's story, do not leave just yet, because there is an important lesson worth discussing. From our perspective, Chelsea's biggest mistake was not simply insulting her sister. She became so dependent on feeling superior that she stopped listening to warnings both at home and at work. We believe success should never require humiliating someone else or supporting business information that cannot be proven. In the United States, knowingly using misleading records can lead to termination, civil consequences, or legal problems depending on the circumstances. Jocelyn made the right choice by disclosing the conflict of interest and stepping away from the review. Now we want to hear from you. If you were Jocelyn, would you have cut Chelsea off completely or given her one final chance? If you see the situation differently or would have handled it another way, share your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching until the end.